Hi, and welcome to this new Friday Live that I'm doing today. Um, I just want to take a minute and say hi if you are tuning in for the first time, and welcome back to people who've been catching some of my earlier Friday Lives and Let's Talk About sessions. So, just want to say it's been a few weeks since I've been on here. I was planning to get this new series during the school holidays. Things didn't always go to plan, as things don't always. And then the last couple of weeks, there's been a few different things happening for me. And then this week, I am home because I've got COVID. So I am being productive as I possibly can. And I've been really, really fortunate that I have not been terribly, terribly unwell. As you might be able to hear, I've got a bit of a funny voice. And so sometimes my throat is not lasting out the day. But that's okay. I'm not going to be too long today, but I did want to introduce this series on Let's Talk About Anxiety, and just tell you a little bit about what we're going to cover over the next probably 4 Fridays. Normally I try to do this first thing in the morning, either 9 or 10:30 in the morning, and I'll let you know when that'll be. That was the plan today, but again, I've been super flexible and things have had to change depending on how I'm feeling and what else has popped up for me online here. So yeah, I hope this is helpful. So I wanted to just introduce some of the different topics that I'm going to share with you over the course of these Friday Live chats. And they're just a few different ideas around what are the most common questions that I suppose come through to me when thinking about anxiety. And so there's a couple of different approaches I'm going to take. Firstly, I want to just acknowledge that anxiety, in terms of how I often see it, is often presented in a more clinical kind of term or in a problematic kind of way. And then there's the anxiety that everybody experiences in some form or another, a physical body reaction or a worry, and that it has a really functional and useful purpose in our life, and all the way through to being incredibly problematic, and needing extra support around either understanding it or working on some strategies and skills to cope with it. So anxiety is such a broad word. It has so many meanings depending upon the context we're talking about it, depending whether it's a problem, depending whether we can reframe and describe it as natural and normal, and a signal that there's excitement and difference and things going on. So we'll be unpacking some of those meanings in future sessions. But today, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna have to get a bit of water from my throat. Yeah, like I said, it's a bit dry and gravelly sounding. So today I'm going to just talk a little bit about, I suppose, parent anxiety to start with, even though often parents come to me and to psychologists and therapists and coaches because they're concerned maybe about the anxiety that their child or teenager might be presenting with. But for that to happen, parent anxiety needs to be elevated and aroused for us to take action. So when parents are experiencing worry and anxiety around their child or their teenager and how they are coping, it's again a very functional response to take that anxiety and motivate it into help seeking kind of behavior to say, I'm concerned, I'm worried, and I need help. And so it's a really, like I said, functional thing when we experience anxiety in that way, and it forces us to do something about it. Now, in this time period where 6 months, say, into the lifting of restrictions following a 2-year pandemic, a pandemic that continues with COVID numbers really, really high, but we've got vaccinations and vaccines on board, and most of the population's covered in that way. It doesn't mean that we're not still impacted by that. And one of the big impacts, I suppose, that I saw in early 2020, when we really began to see that COVID would be something that we would all know something about and be impacted in some way, is the anxiety rising. Anxiety was rising in everybody. Anxiety rose in the healthcare sector substantially. And whilst I'm not a frontline healthcare worker, therapists and healthcare and allied healthcare providers such as myself were absolutely experiencing the elevated anxiety levels of families not sure and what this meant, that we were going into lockdowns or that we were bracing ourselves for COVID infections that would do who knows what to society, and how can we protect ourselves and things like that. Then we felt the anxiety of just change, the fact that we had to change from being in connection and seeking help and doing day-to-day activities in the room with people or in the schools with people, to being locked away from each other, being trained to fear one another and fear proximity to one another for fear of contracting and transmitting this COVID virus. So there was huge alarm bells and huge reasons and big amounts of anxiety that were being shared on every platform all the time, in terms of media or in terms of conversations that people were having. And again, that fear and that anxiety was to be protective, to protect our physical well-being and to reduce the negative impacts as much as possible. But thinking back on all of that change and all of that anxiety that we experienced back then, and watching what unfolded over the last couple of years, has meant that now that we're back face to face, most of the time, although there's still restrictions and things, I know just recently a local service has reduced their face-to-face appointments again because of the very high numbers of transmission in the community at the moment. And they're part of the hospital kind of legislation and things like that. And so they've had to do that for the welfare of their staff and the welfare of their clients and things like that. But what we've seen in the counselling and allied health and mental health field is, like I said, all this change, or the change in how we could continue supporting our clients, how us as a workforce have been impacted by all these changes, is that the burnout of healthcare professionals and allied health and therapy professionals is significant. In terms of the need for support and mental health following all the lockdowns, particularly in Victoria, that we experienced, and just the dislocation and the impact on kids, excuse me, the impact on teachers, the impact on so many businesses that had to close suddenly and were unable to continue because of all the changes in people not being able to leave their homes and having lockdowns and things. The impact on that in terms of anxiety and depression that we're seeing has been substantial. So much so that, in terms of impact on demand for therapists has gone up, so that about a third are no longer seeing new clients, a third of private practices, and just a massive change in wait lists as well. So in city locations, wait lists might have been, 2 weeks to a month to get in to see somebody. That's out to about 3 months. And in our regional and rural locations where wait lists are already substantial, that is likely to be that 6 to 12 months on average, kind of thing. So we know that this whole run-on effect of what we've seen with the pandemic and what we've seen even with opening back up again is that need where parents are feeling anxious about their children or their teens. And I'm still hearing and continuing to hear stories about how that re-entry into face-to-face is still ongoing and still a challenge for lots of families, lots of kids and lots of teens. So there's challenges coming out of lockdown there's repercussions of being in lockdown, and in terms of not recovering just once you're allowed to go back and do things, there's just a whole disconnect that needs to be overcome. Sorry about it. And how when parents now feel that level of anxiety and are looking to reach out, they are finding it tricky and really difficult, excuse me, to actually get in to see a therapist, to see a psychologist and things like that. So there's awareness, there's understanding that there's need there, but then there's the where do I go from here? How do I get help for my child when all the service provisions are overloaded as well? Because everyone's doing the same thing. And there's likely even less therapists than there were because of having left the system because of burnout, having not had a break over the last 2.5 years in terms of supporting their own families and also their client families and things like that. So family anxiety can certainly be understood to be at a high in terms of all the extra challenges, and then going, where do I get that help? So we're going to be talking a bit about a more detail around what families can do, different kinds of resources, so getting us to think a bit flexibly about what else is out there in terms of different kinds of support. Again, with schools being open again, there are wellbeing teams and things like that that are able to be accessed. But I understand that again, there's this finite resource kind of situation in terms of accessing even wellbeing staff and local services and things like that. So we'll be talking a little bit more about again what parents can do within their own home once they've been alerted that perhaps their child or teen is experiencing high levels of anxiety, and understanding what that looks like and what can help for it. But I'm going to leave that to a couple of more sessions down the track, because I can feel that my throat's not going to hold up too much more before I'm going to have a coughing fit, and that's not going to be pleasant for anybody. So that's all. I just wanted to kind of acknowledge what we've been going through, what we're continuing to go through with continued time, people having to have away through sickness, through just well-being and mental health needs that need to be attended to, and just be thinking outside the box at whether therapy or coaching is something that might be needed, and what that might look like. So some of you might know that when I'm not practicing in my side-by-side psychology practice, I also am a parent coach and do coaching outside of that. So I run tuning into teens and tuning into kids as part of my work with each. And that's again in a coaching capacity for parents. And I also run coaching groups specifically for parents who are learning about maybe their autistic or neurodivergent child's presentations, and take people through some modules with other parents in a small group online fashion. So just thinking that those things are not therapy, they're different to the work that I do in the practice, but there's certainly support. And there's other programs as well that I know that are out there, whether it's mine or somebody else's, who run like modules and training and education that can be helpful for when people are sitting on wait lists and things like that. So if you want to have a quick look at the difference between therapy and coaching, you can head to my Kate French website, and I'll put the link in there. I've got a free resource that you can download that helps understand the difference between the two, and also different ways that I might be able to work with you in a slightly different capacity, just because my hours at my side-by-side psychology practice are incredibly limited with long wait lists, like we were sort of talking about. So anyway, I'm going to finish up today by just letting you know that if you're keen to learn a bit more about anxiety, whether it's parent anxiety, but we're going to go more into what happens when your young child is anxious, and some of the things to be aware of, and also some of the ways that you might be able to support your child or teen in this time. Please keep an eye open on this Facebook page, or head to my YouTube channel for the replays where I store them. So, wherever you are, I hope you're having a really great Friday. I'm going to have a very quiet weekend while I wait out the rest of my days until I feel a little bit better and come out of my quarantine. So, I hope you're looking after yourself. I hope that if you are unwell, that you get better very soon and we get through this crazy winter time together, no matter where you are. All right, everybody, thank you for watching. And if you've got any questions, please just pop it in the comments or send me an email and I will do my best to get back to you. All right, I'll talk to you very soon. Bye bye.